with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. We'll be hearing from Results Positive CEO and Solutions Architect, Mr. John Ferner, more than 20-year veteran of the IT service industry. We'll be reviewing some of the top ways to estimate, allocate, and manage your project investments, with a particular emphasis on ServiceNow, although a lot of these principles are readily applicable across whatever solutions you may be using. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to John.
Just a brief introduction for Results Positive. We really help organizations focus on delivering positive outcomes and results for their software investments. Either that's from us doing actual application development and development of analytics, which we'll see some of that today, or whether that be implementing various software solutions such as ServiceNow and other solutions as well. So we appreciate everyone joining today. Our core set of services are around doing assessments and roadmaps, helping organizations implement the business processes as well as technology, as well as supporting them with ongoing managed services or software as a service. So thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to our discussion. So the first thing here to kind of highlight is kind of the common questions that we receive from executives that they're kind of challenged with is, first, they need to know, what are we investing in? And so they need to have that visibility. And we've just seen tremendous value in providing visibility. A lot of times executives think they know what's going on, but maybe some of their direct reports and such might be submitting initiatives maybe that aren't fully aligned with the overall goals and objectives of the department or division. And so we found that visibility helps drive better decision making, which we'll highlight here in our session today. So kind of answering that question, what are we investing in? What should we invest in? So that's really kind of probably the hardest question, is what should we invest in? What's going to help the organization achieve their goals and objectives? And also, right, we need to think about how's that going to impact the individual members of the organization. And then how do we protect those investments? So definitely in times that are challenging or there's uncertainty in the market, it's really important. And what we found is many organizations focus on their project portfolio management processes and systems more during challenging market times. It's really more important to understand, are we investing in the right things? Do we have the right resources available? And how do we protect those investments to ensure that those vital few investments deliver on the value that we're looking for? So those are kind of the core questions and really what we're trying to accomplish. So when we look at different ways to optimize project investments, one that we've definitely seen, and it's not as popular, but eliminate the unnecessary in-flight projects. So a lot of times what we find is that once a project gets green-lighted or once that project is approved, then we're going to always make sure that we deliver that, which is a little bit different than our own personal investment portfolio. We might purchase a stock today and think it's going to be great, but tomorrow we get a news report and they may be going bankrupt. So maybe we shouldn't continue with that investment as an example. So just as an example of just because we have projects in our pipeline, the right way of optimizing our investments might be to stop certain projects. The middle here, shifting spending. So let's shift our spending on those strategic, value generating, or even self-funding initiatives that might generate funding for the initiative itself. So versus focusing on maybe initiatives that aren't providing as much value or maybe more operational in nature. And then what I've mentioned, and we'll see a little bit of a theme here, is just making sure that we understand our strategic plan, our strategic goals, but also providing that visibility to executives so they can understand what we're actually investing in, and they can quickly see whether or not we're aligned to the desired outcomes of the organization. That visibility also then drives adoption, and it helps the organization make better decisions. And it's important to put that in a overall end user experience that entices the executives at all levels of the organization and gives them the right amount of information to make decisions. And we found that by doing so, better decisions are made. So the first portion here of our session today is about selecting the right investments. And so that's going to cover multiple different capabilities, from strategic planning, portfolio management, as well as demand management. And we'll kind of describe those here as we go through. So when we look at the right projects, right, we want to first avoid those non-value generating initiatives, right? So if we do some form of looking at the ROI, looking at the cost benefit, we can skip over those initiatives. We're not going to drive the best value. And then in the middle here, we're going to focus on the right prioritized initiatives. So a lot of times that's the challenge, is how do we prioritize? What's the best way to prioritize? And how do we make those best decisions? And so definitely it's important to look for a prioritization model, which we'll highlight a few here today. But it's also important to have a good governance and visibility so that you can then really kind of make those right decisions, which gets to the third item here. Having that visibility and the governance is what we found is critical for success. So if we look at the overall project life cycle here, both from an investment perspective as well as from a delivery perspective, this kind of highlights 4 key areas that really are going to drive value and help us optimize our project investments. So we have on top the executive visibility. So that visibility combined with governance is going to help ensure the increased decisions that are made, as well as make sure that we aren't working on things that aren't going to drive value. We definitely have then the strategic portfolio management. We're going to do strategic planning. We need to understand the goals and the alignment, have an overall strategic portfolio roadmap that should be our anchor to kind of drive and guide decisions. And then we have the whole demand intake process, where we're going to receive and provide the organization an avenue to submit their ideas, to submit their recommendations on how they think we can improve the organization, either grow the organization, make the organization more efficient, or maybe look for transformation that's needed due to the changing marketplace. And as we're bringing in that demand, we want to be able to categorize and prioritize, and ultimately understand a business case so we understand whether or not we have going to be generating value from those various proposed initiatives. At the same time, we want to understand the risk of actually going forward with that initiative, because we want to balance that with other initiatives. And then we want to move into the portfolio management around the strategic alignment. So once we've got things prioritized, then that portfolio management comes into play. We get the governance in play, and we're really trying to make sure that, okay, we've got 10 really value generating initiatives, but of those 10, which ones are supporting kind of our investment plans for the year. And so we want to align those with the different portfolios and make those final decisions with executives as part of governance. And so that's a key area. And then the bottom row here, trying to highlight resource management, especially in challenging times, right? We have a vital few resources, both financial and human resources. But in this case, we're going to focus more on human resources. And we need to understand what's our current availability, which is a function of capacity minus our previous allocations or commitments. And so that we can actually make a decision and say, yes, we can fund this particular initiative and we can start it today, or yes, we can fund this initiative and start it in 6 months, or no, we need to get some external resources to be able to deliver that initiative. And so that's really vital here, because we want to optimize utilization of our resources, and we also want to optimize value. So as a part of that portfolio process, when we are looking at resource availability, a lot of times we don't think about, well, I don't have enough resources, so maybe we need to procure more resources. In challenging times, we might not have that as an option. So we might need to put a project on hold or stop a current project that's no longer needed so that we can free up the resources to focus on our current highest priority, best value generating initiatives. So definitely some key topics there and key items to focus on. So if we look just a little bit further here around demand management, like I mentioned, it's a way to have that intake process. So those various initiatives can come into play. They can come from different parts of the organization, as highlighted here, but we're balancing those resources, the budget, the human resources, we're balancing the prioritization as we are looking at really just trying to categorize the different types of demands, put together that overall business case so we understand how much dollars we're going to have to spend, and we understand how many resources it's going to take. So that's the key there, is to help to prioritize and pull together a business case so we understand the value and the risk so we can use that for prioritization. In terms of prioritization models, we do have a few examples here of starting point prioritization models. They definitely vary by organization, but here's some example prioritization model. We do recommend keeping your prioritization model as simple as possible. So in this example here, we're looking at an overall risk, value, and a size score to really kind of determine how we should prioritize these various initiatives. And so here we're kind of looking at different dimensions. So under risk, we typically see around compliance. You're looking at legal, audit, risk type items. So that can be a factor into your prioritization. Then enterprise-wide, right? Are we focusing on standardization, or is it something new? Are we retiring legacy items? Are we compliant with architecture and security, as an example? Definitely really important areas today. So those are going to be different dimensions of your risk. From a value perspective, we're looking at alignment to strategic objectives. We're looking at efficiency improvements. We're looking at financial growth or financial optimization. So those will be key alignments there around value. And then just from a size perspective, how much is it going to cost, and both from a financial and a human resource perspective. So that's in the common example. We also see various levels when it comes to deploying your prioritization model. It can be a simple checkbox. It can be some guided questions, or it could actually be surveys. So we'll highlight here a little bit of the common maturity roadmap from a ServiceNow perspective. Here's another example, very similar here, but just different categorizations underneath risk, value, and size, and different other kind of basically more terms, if you will. A lot of this is the same information, but here kind of the difference in value is focusing on financials and then that strategic alignment. And then under risk, we're focusing on very heavily on execution. Can we actually execute this? And then from that operational perspective gets into that compliance and audit, legal, and security. Then we have the common kind of size component here. So obviously organizations do different prioritization models to come up with an overall priority score to help them in the evaluation process. Here's another example more from an agile perspective. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do a detailed business case, but really just kind of high level, top of the napkin type of estimates, just kind of looking at, risk reduction, business value, what those scores might be, looking at it from a high level size perspective, time criticality, and then kind of the opportunity there. So another way of looking at your priority score, more from an agile perspective. Now, if we look at it from a maturity model perspective, there are different maturity in each organization. And so they might implement their scoring and prioritization model differently based upon where the organization is today. So a simple starting is kind of using the rank scoring. So that's where you're going to use system generated values that are going to help calculate value based upon the cost and information that you actually put in as part of your business case. Also, this here is where you could just have some simple various categories, and you just select those various items there, and it kind of gives you your overall risk and value score. So very simple here, but definitely a good starting point. The item in the middle here is really more for a criteria base. So this is where you'd have multiple criteria or questions on the specific project proposal or demand. And there you would be able to have someone answer those questions, or those questions would be confirmed from the PMO or whoever in the governance. And so you'd have those 5 or 6 questions. They would have kind of multiple choice answers. Each one of those would be weighted, and that would drive an overall risk and value score. So just one overall criteria questions. It's not a survey, which is the next approach, where you would survey out to multiple stakeholders. So you'd be collecting actual scores across the different dimensions for multiple stakeholders, and then normalizing those scores. So we see that more as an advanced function, but definitely one that can be beneficial by sending it out to a common set of overall stakeholders. So those are the common different approaches. Obviously, there's other approaches that we've implemented for other organizations, but those are the common approaches here by looking at a prioritization and the different scoring models. And next here, as a result of that, here in ServiceNow, you can then go look at your overall demand workbench here and look at your demand assessment scoring. So you can look at the risk versus value and see how your different initiatives, those demands, rank against other demands to help with decision making. So definitely something that we see organizations using. This overall map is also now included in the portfolio planning workbench. So you can also use that and not have to use the demand workbench. So your choice there. But it just gives you an ability as part of your governance reviews to really kind of assess and confirm, are we focusing on the right initiatives? Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the key things that we found for prioritization, but also really about focusing on, are we actually going to spend our dollars on the right initiatives, is having a good governance model in place. So this is a standard governance model template that we use in reviewing with customers. And so you can kind of see off to the right-hand side, down at the bottom, we've got our project review. So those are in-flight projects. The next, we've got the intake here around demand management. Next, we kind of roll up into portfolio management, and then into portfolio optimization. And so you can kind of use that governance model to help drive decisions. Obviously, you would set up your different types of governance entities. Sometimes you might have multiple different entities if you have different governance models by business unit versus a centralized. So you might have a more distributed governance model. But just to kind of highlight, as part of demand management, you want to come in and have that overall governance model to help confirm, yes, we can go forward with these initiatives based upon all of the analysis, the business case, the resource availability. And so that's what's really critical here, is that when you're making those decisions, it's not just on dollars. A lot of times it's just on dollars, or it's not just on schedule. It's not just on, it's a legal requirement, but it's really around, what's the business value? What's the prioritization? Do we have enough resources to work on it? And then obviously giving that visibility to the decision makers via the executives and the governance model, so that they can see the full breadth of current investments, so they can help make the best decision on the new investments. Next, I want to just kind of highlight some examples here for analytics. So keeping it rather high level today, we'll be definitely doing some more deep dive demonstrations as one-on-one with the customer. Also, we'll be scheduling some follow-up webinars as well. So what I wanted to show here, and as I mentioned up front, analytics really drive better decisions. And so here we see one of our enterprise portfolio portals that we create. And so this gives executives view into what's going on. It also gives them a view into governance decisions. It gives them a view into that demand intake. And so we see that the CIOs, the COOs, and all the business unit leaders are using these rave reviews. They use them all the time because they're very simple and easy to use. It's kind of definitely designed specifically for executives. And then what they can do, they can actually drill into information as well. So they can look at a particular demand intake and they can drill into that. But basically, it's just going to pop up and show them the business case. So they'll be able to answer the question, okay, what's the cost, what's the benefit, what's the expected outcome associated with this particular initiative, all from that overall portal. And so that's going to help drive better decisions and also help with the governance process. Next, I wanted to move towards securing the right resources. So yes, it is part of that overall governance process, which I've been mentioning, but I wanted to focus in on securing the right resources in terms of portfolio management and that final optimization, that final decision making. We think about it that we have the demand intake coming in and we're focusing on prioritization and optimization. And definitely we'll do some governance around that at the right level. But then we go to the next level into portfolio management and overall green lighting of initiatives. We definitely need to make sure that we have the right resources. And so that's part of that portfolio management and green lighting process. So from a portfolio management perspective, similar here in terms of intakes coming into the portfolio. But really what we're trying to focus on here is what is the right level of investment based upon our goals for a particular year. So we see a portfolio set up for grow, run, transform by business unit, by overall strategy. You can see here from a healthcare strategy perspective. So what is the right level of investment? So just like your own personal investment in stocks and things of that nature, right? What's the right investment grouping? What's the overall right composition of our investments for the organization? How much should we really invest in running the business versus growing the business versus transforming the business as an example? So that's really kind of the key here for portfolio management, making those final investment decisions. What is that right mix? Should it be 51, 51, 20 for revenue generating efficiencies and transformation? Should it be flipped this year? So that could definitely change on a year by year basis based upon the changing market conditions. And so a lot of times that's the focus around portfolio management is, hey, we've got this current investment of projects and that's going to drive X revenue and efficiencies and or transformation. We got these new ones coming in. We can see some good value propositions and some good business cases there. But what is the right mix there? So that's what we're looking to accomplish here in portfolio management. Now, portfolio management typically starts off with strategic planning. And so strategic planning includes multiple different activities. First here, looking at what are the strategic goals? Those strategic goals can change. We know that organizations from a legacy perspective always did annual planning. A lot of that still is occurring today, but we're seeing more adaptive planning. It can be monthly planning, it can be quarterly planning. And so those goals need to be monitored and managed and updated because we know the market condition changes. So those strategic goals will change as well. So in addition to managing those goals, we need to have a way to be able to make sure that the initiatives align to those various goals so that we can focus on the outcomes. And then we need to manage that backlog, right? That backlog of intake via demands and or those projects. And we need to put in our overall strategic roadmap so that we can achieve the goals and objectives. We need to be able to kind of look at dependencies across that roadmap. And so that's what you get with the strategic planning workspace, is to be able to manage all those components, our goals, managing our backlog, the intake, as well as then prioritizing and actually setting up an overall roadmap. And what's nice here is those decisions made at this level will filter down into the actual intake demand or project proposal, as well as a project. So you'll be able to see what their approved start and end dates are while not impacting the project. And that way it's communicating to the different managers that they might need to adjust their timeline, or they might need to talk to the strategic planning team or governance committee on the updated timeline that they would like to release that particular set of capabilities or functionality. In addition to looking at the strategic planning workspace, there's also scenario planning. And eventually this is going to be into the strategic planning workspace. This allows you to start doing some what if scenario analysis. What if we did these 4 different initiatives that have been proposed versus these other 4 initiatives? How would that impact us from a cost perspective? How would that impact us from an overall resource utilization perspective? So it gives you that type of visualization so that you can make those decisions knowingly. So there's no surprises as you start on those projects, that you've secured the resources, there'll be no delays. Definitely one way to help protect your project investments. Obviously, a key component here around portfolio management is the governance, right? So yes, you want to do that strategic planning, you want to do your overall what if scenario analysis. And so once you've got that recommended set of items, you want to present that to the governance board for their review and approval. And so it's important to do that. And as we've mentioned before, it's important to make sure that when you're making those decisions, it's not just looking at it from one lens. We need to look at it from the financial lens, the human resource availability lens, the business value lens, the prioritization and alignment to our strategic objectives. So you look at all those lenses in making those decisions so we can best protect our investments. Now, one thing that we do see as well is organizations implement just a resource management governance model. So that's definitely a great way to go when you're just focusing on resource scheduling, resource availability. But the best approach is if you can integrate that into the overall governance model. But some organizations need to have another focus just around resource management. So as an output of the overall governance, then move into resource management to do the finer details for allocations and getting those projects started with the resources based upon the higher level decisions. So that's one thing to think about as you're looking at optimizing and securing the right resources. Now, resource management is definitely a popular topic and area that we're working with many customers on today. And one thing that you'll notice here in this high level picture is that resource management basically goes throughout the process. So as part of that demand intake process, right, we need to understand what our resource needs are. And so we need to factor that in. And so it starts in that process. Then we do the portfolio management, the governance. So we're going to be looking at what is the current resource availability. And that's going to be based upon managing the capacity that we see over here on the right-hand side, managing the ongoing allocation requests for resources, while at the same time we're managing project resource forecasts as well as our operational resource forecasts. So those are going to be key because we all know that not all resources are fully dedicated to projects. So these are some of the common practices that we see with organizations. It's also things that we deep dive into as part of our resource management training, as well as our resource management roadmap training. So if you're looking to implement resource management, that's a great way to tap into those 4-hour sessions where we deep dive here into resource management. Another way to look at that process just from a ServiceNow perspective is you're going to start with those resource plans here in the demand, that project proposal phase. They're going to then, once it's approved, going through portfolio and governance, then you'll have those resource plans here. Then the project managers can manage those estimates, right? Things might change, but they also then manage the resource requests. So they can request resources from resource managers, and they can then allocate resources. So at that point, then I would know that we have a resource we can work on our project. And the good news here is that we could work on it from agile development or traditional waterfall, all within ServiceNow. So it kind of gives you additional high level flow from a resource perspective in the product. So as we've kind of been mentioning here, this resource management goes throughout the entire process. So whether we're focusing on demand or portfolio management, or focusing on overall resource, it's all kind of combined together. But these 4 areas are really key for driving overall optimization of your investments. So next here, if we wanted to kind of look at some of the analytics that can be available here for portfolio. So we'll highlight some of those analytics here. Next here, we're looking at PMO dashboard that's available in ServiceNow. So you've got the various KPIs to kind of track what your estimated costs are, as well as be able to track the actual performance related to your actual initiative. You can actually see the trend, if you will, of the intake, whether it be coming from ideas and demands to projects. You can also look at data accuracy and data completeness. There's some checks and reports that you have out of the box, so you can validate that you have all the data you need to make decisions. So that's an out of the box reporting capability. Results positive, we have built some portals that are really beneficial for organizations, some similar to what I was showing before, and we'll highlight that as well. But here, if we're looking at that resource forecast and availability, as we're making those decisions, we really need to understand, do we have the capacity to work on this? We've had organizations that we've implemented this for, they've come back later and said, this has been fantastic. We've been doing our annual planning. We're putting in all of our project proposals and demands. We're estimating our resource needs. Then we toggle over here and we're able to quickly see, oh, we still have more capacity for more demand, so we can put more in. Or no, we're over capacity. So now I start making those trade-off decisions, start looking into overall prioritization. Here's another view of that. So basically what you're able to look at here is what's your overall planned capacity for operational as well as project, and then be able to look at planned hours based upon the demands or projects that are in flight, as well as on your actuals if you're doing time tracking. So it gives you that full visibility, lets you know down here in the availability row here, do we have gaps that we need to address that we can't make commitments on? And so it really gives you that visibility. It's very nicely provided for executives so they can easily get access to this information. Next here, we have the executive portal from Results Positive we mentioned before. So we see a lot of organizations from this, they actually have the link and they just open up the resource availability portal that we just mentioned. But here, you know, it's all kind of connected here, because when we're focusing on resources, we need to understand what the work is. So we need to understand visibility into those demands and projects and roadmaps. At the same time, we need to understand the resource impacts. So that can bring this all together. Also from a portfolio management perspective, just like demand management, we still want to look at the business case. So having a really nice 1-pager, 2-pager business case that's easily digestible by executives, we found has been very key. So that's something that we offer and something that can be available. And then when we're looking at more on the portfolio side, instead of just looking at the planning and looking at the planning decisions, you typically are going on to look at the overall status of what's going on. So executives from their executive portal, one click, and they'll be presented here with the overall status report. And that status report is going to have the same look and feel, the same design as every status report in the organization. And so that's just extremely powerful for the organization, so they don't have to get used to different versions. Also, this can be exported to PowerPoint, so you can kind of get away from everybody creating internal PowerPoints of different designs and rolling out here with one consistent view. Sometimes you probably have questions about that, if that's possible. We definitely have organizations where all their PMOs are using the solution. They are all using the same status reports. A couple of organizations where instead of just having one status report, there's 2 or 3 templates. So a couple parts of the organization had a slightly different requirement, but they have 2 or 3 templates. So when the PM creates his or her status report, they just select the appropriate template. And so then it's going to be in that specific layout with that specific data. And so that way you can kind of facilitate some of those anomalies or some of the specific requirements you might have with different parts of the organization. So next I wanted to go to protecting project investments. And so we've been talking about, we have these challenging times. We need to first answer, what should we invest in? Do we have the right people to support those investments? Now, when you look at, okay, we've already made decisions, we have a project in flight, we need to make sure that we're protecting those investments, right? We don't want to have a project overrun. We don't want to have a schedule delay, as an example. So those are some of the things we want to look at here and protecting our investments. So one thing we want to introduce here is this whole idea of a project rationalization. So I alluded to that up front. How many times do we actually stop projects? We all know we stop various investments in our stock portfolio, but how many times do we actually stop projects or put projects on hold? So I want to talk briefly about project portfolio rationalization practices. Obviously, from an investment perspective, we want to be able to deliver the solution, deliver the capabilities as quickly as possible using the desired delivery approach. So agile, traditional, hybrid. So we definitely want to enable that. And then project analytics here, can reinforce it again. It's going to be some of the similar reporting that you've seen. But what we found is if you have a vital few set of metrics and dashboards and reporting, it provides that alignment across the organization, keeps everyone focused on those core critical vital few metrics, and it's going to drive significant benefit and value for the organization. So from a project portfolio rationalization perspective, this is something that we see occurring, say, on a quarterly basis. The PMO or other parts of the organization do a quick assessment of the in-flight projects and first understand those projects based upon the business IT context. Next, you want to kind of analyze that portfolio from an overall value perspective. So are we actually driving value here? Are those initiatives still needed as the market changed? Right? Do we still need that new capability as an example? Have we actually just divested that part of our business? So kind of analyzing your portfolio, analyzing that portfolio mix, right? That portfolio mix we talked about earlier could change. Next, you want to be able to make recommendations. Which one of our current in-flight projects should we stop? What should we continue? What should we potentially make a shift? Maybe we want to put on hold temporarily and shift to a new intake initiative that we want to actually greenlight and kind of shift our funding there. And then from a plan perspective, we want to review and update the overall project roadmap based upon business value realization. Also from a planning perspective, right, you could start analyzing the value that's supposed to be generated, but also some of your business value realization. So from an overall process perspective, right, you're going to have to do that kind of assessment here as part of the understanding phase here. So that can be more from a top-down interviewing, surveying project managers, seeing how things are going with the current projects, or it can be also just the PMO kind of bottom-up, reviewing your current portfolio roadmap, reviewing the current financial resource commitments, reviewing those portfolio optimization mix that you're looking for, looking at also on the business value to come up with what you think the right inventory of applications should be. And that will become accomplished through your analyzation activities. So you want to look at that business value, the scoring, the capability, the cost versus value. Here again, you want to keep this pretty simple, and you really probably only want to focus on those projects that are in flight that might be more questionable. But depending upon what your budget is and how your business is constrained with changing market conditions, you might need to do a deep dive, or maybe you just look at, based on a criteria, a subset of your overall portfolio to rationalize. So in the end, we want to determine where do we want to increase our investments. Maybe we have an in-flight project and they've identified some additional capabilities. Hey, let's increase our investment there. Let's look at retiring or putting on hold other projects, as well as then we might want to then greenlight some additional projects. So at the end of the day, we would have an updated project roadmap that we feel is rationalized for a current state of the business, the current focus on our overall goals and objectives. Then standard things that you'd want to be able to do is protecting your project investments, right? We want to make sure we're continuing to monitor our projects, want to make sure that we're doing our project review boards as part of your overall governance process. So we want to be able to project management tools. We want to continue to track and manage the resources to understand who's working on our various initiatives, making sure that they're not getting over allocated or pulled in different directions. If so, right, that's a governance decision, either from your resource governance model or from your overall governance model to make those decisions, because we really want to try to optimize overall investments and returns. Definitely want to manage the overall project controls. So you can definitely do that here with ServiceNow to manage that. I really like how you can kind of manage the overall end-to-end workflow. A risk can be converted to an issue, issue can be converted to a decision, to an action, to a change flow. So yeah, you can definitely flow in that fashion. Obviously, another way of looking at protecting your investments is starting to track actuals. So some organizations don't track actuals, but if you're tracking actuals, you're understanding what you're spending. You're understanding, earlier on in your project, are we going to be over budget or under budget? So another effective way to help protect your project investments. Then next, support the different types of delivery approaches that we talked about. So in this case, more from an agile development, Scrum perspective, or from a SAFe perspective. Obviously, you could do an overall waterfall or just an overall hybrid approach. And then for analytics here for project delivery, you'll see basically the same type of analytics here. So I'll be able to go through here pretty quickly. But it goes back to that point, if we can have a common vital few set of metrics and analytics, that we can make that visible from the top down of the organization to the bottom up of the organization, it's going to drive tremendous value and better decisions. So here's, we mentioned earlier, kind of looking at that overall project delivery. So there's some actual, with performance analytics, you can track on-time delivery trends, on budget delivery trends, critical risk trends with your different projects. So there's a lot of really good out-of-the-box KPIs, and they're trended. So you actually have that trend historical data, and you can then roll it up, roll it down by portfolio. So you can see which portfolio is delivering better on their projects versus another portfolio. Then we have our enterprise portfolio portals and roadmaps, as we talked before. Extremely high value here. And like we said, CIOs and executives use it. Project managers really like it as well, because they get to basically highlight the great effort they're doing in managing the projects in the very nice formatted project status reports. And so executives get to see that. They get to highlight the benefit that they're providing in protecting those investments. So it's a win-win for both parts of the organization. So we kind of showed here a small view of the project status report. And this is kind of our starting point. We've done many, many different variations of this for each organization, but keep it simple, focus on core metrics, have it in a one-pager or a two-pager, and then you can have that consistent reporting, consistent look and feel, as we've mentioned before. So just an example. Definitely you can reach out. We can do a demonstration here, look at implementing our solutions here or tailoring it to your specific example. So I'm based on time here. I've got a couple things here, and I'm just going to go really quick through here. But the topic of our discussion today is around project investment optimization. And so here's another way of looking at it in terms of common outcomes. So by focusing on strategic business value, by optimizing the delivery performance and protecting your investments, as well as looking for ways to reduce burdens, we can drive that business growth you're looking for. You can maximize your attainment of your strategic objectives. We can reduce project delivery costs. We can avoid costly delays, budget overruns. So definitely some common outcomes by implementing these practices and implementing ServiceNow. Here's also some views if you're looking at it from an overall tangible perspective. Obviously, these percentages are examples here, but definitely illustrative of what we've seen with organizations. But demand management really drives significant benefit, because basically that allows you to say no, because we don't want to focus on something that's non-value added, that didn't get really a high priority score, that didn't have a positive business case. So it's an opportunity to make sure that you're only focusing on the right initiatives, thereby avoiding unnecessary cost on other initiatives. Similar here on the portfolio management side, right? Let's make sure we're investing and optimize our investment mix. So that's going to really help drive Typically, in most cases, it actually drives more revenue growth versus savings. So it's really going to drive attainment of outcomes. And then status reporting, have a consistent look and feel of status reporting and analytics, as you kind of seen here through the presentation, that executive top-down view, as well as that information rolling up, whether it be from a business case or from a project status report. Significant savings there. You don't have to have all the different PowerPoints and everything else occurring in the organization. So a great way to streamline, protect your investment, and shift those investments into additional projects. So the question we have now in terms of ending our webinar today is, what's the right opportunity for you to drive investment, to drive value in your organization, whether it be through strategic value-based portfolio management, demand management, and resource management, or analytics. Those would be some of the key areas that you want to potentially pursue. So think about that. But those are definitely areas that we can assist you in. So we look forward to working with you on that. Some of the common next steps: schedule a health check or a value discovery workshop. So a health check, if you've got the existing solution, you like to understand how you can use it more, understand how you can implement some of the nice executive portfolio dashboards, the project status reports, or we can do a value discovery workshop if you're looking at migrating to ServiceNow. We can do that as well. You could also schedule just a review of some of the analytics we've shown today, and kind of get more of a hands-on view of those. You could schedule an implementation engagement with us, so that can be for implementing portfolio or demand or resource management, as an example. Or you could attend one of our upcoming PPM and resource management training sessions, but also includes our roadmap sessions. So these are the common customer journey next steps. So I look forward to interacting with you and being a partner with you as part of next steps.